It always used to seem to me when I was younger, the world was in a terrible shape and it was too hard to change it. And that you had to be a very sort of big person in order to be able to do that. And that I wasn't, and I would never be able to change anything or make any difference whatsoever. That's what I felt like. But I always wanted to. And then I think that finally, when I did what was right in front of me to do, which was use that huge amount of money I had to create social change, to make the world better, things changed for the better for me.
Mother Earth, Mother Earth, we are grateful for our birth. Our rainbow loves do you embrace, shining in the night of space. You're our planet, green and blue, with a heart of fire inside of you. Mother Earth, Mother Earth, we are grateful for our birth.
Thank you all for coming. I want to talk to you about the gift economy, about the reasons why I started the Foundation for a Compassionate Society, some about my pathway. I became a feminist and I developed a philosophy which I call the gift economy, which is based really on gift-giving practices that are spread throughout the world, mainly among indigenous peoples, among societies that are based on matriarchies rather than on the patriarchy. And I say matriarchy because as mothers, we have to satisfy the needs of our children without expecting any return, no kickback. We just have to give and satisfy the need. Whereas in our economics, in our capitalism, you only practice exchange. You give in order to get back. And exchange is ego-oriented. It comes back to the receiver, to the giver. You use the other person's need to your own advantage. By satisfying that need, it comes back to you. And other orientation and the mothering way are disqualified in our society. They're made to seem either, saintly or terribly impractical, profligate, and that sort of thing. So that it's part of misogyny is putting down that nurturing way as anything other than just within the family and within the relation between mother and infant. Instead, I would love to base our whole economics on that way. Men have had mothers too, so they can also access that way within themselves. But I think it's much better if they will follow the leadership of women, because I think women have a clearer approach to it, a better and clearer way of dealing with it. And men have not been brought up to nurture, whereas women have. So I'm very much for the leadership of women. And we have already in our society tried male leadership. And I have to say it really hasn't worked, because we see the end of the planet at hand almost, unless we can really change those values. We see too much suffering. We see millions of people dying of hunger when it's not necessary, when the planet provides enough for everyone. It's just distributed badly. It's distributed in an egotistical way rather than an altruistic, other-oriented way.
The reason I want to give it to Genevieve at this particular point in time is because Genevieve was very instrumental in nurturing that movement through her gifting. As somebody from the South, I don't know whether North American women realize how very important she's been in building that international and global women's movement. I just wanted you to know, Jen, that all those projects, we've heard about Wings, we've heard about Fire, we've heard about the Peace Tent, but we haven't heard about the hundreds and hundreds of small projects and small visions that you have really supported. And that book, in a sense, is about a movement that you had a very large hand in creating.
Over the years, I gave donations to lots of groups for social change. And I also started my own projects.
We are walking in a circle to create the promised land, to create.
Each of those projects involved lots of people for many years. Right now, I am at Stonehaven Ranch, which is a retreat center for women and peace and justice groups. And it has been going on since 1984. We have been offering free or low-cost, wonderful accommodations to women over the years, basically every weekend.
And she had a pretty well-formed concept of what this place should be. In the first place, she wanted it as an example of the gift economy. And secondly, she wanted it to be a women's space. And if there is no male energy that is the boss, things change.
Jen had two facilities, Alma and Stonehaven. In 1996, she donated Alma de Mujer to Indigenous Women's Network, which was the most phenomenal gift in my lifetime I've ever known for a non-Indigenous person to give land as such to Indigenous women. So they now use it as their program base, office, and do programs out of Alma de Mujer. Working with Native people for 25 years, the most important thing to them is a land base, to provide land, facilities for gatherings, conferences, ceremonies. It's the most important thing to them because the land gives power to the people.
And I want to tell you about a wonderful social experiment, the Foundation for a Compassionate Society. The foundation is a private operating foundation, which means that it does many different projects of its own, and they're all run by women because we believe in women's leadership according to women's values.
At 3rd and Congress, the Grassroots Peace Organization building, which is a building that was owned by Genevieve Vaughn and gifted to the community here in Austin. We had as many as, at any given time, maybe a dozen organizations in the building. The Texas Civil Rights Project occupied almost the whole floor. The United Farm Workers, Campaign for Global Security, the Foundation for a Compassionate Society.
Working for the foundation, for one thing, has been just one series of adventures after another and tests of my skills and skills that I didn't even know that I had. And I say that because I don't think it's to be taken lightly, the importance of giving women the opportunity to do something even if they've never done it before, and to find out just where their strengths are.
She put together an event on feminist family values. I'm sure this was her idea, to this concept, feminist family values, and who she brought together. And the idea of putting feminism and family values in the same phrase was just brilliant.
In celebration of Mother's Day, let me say that we need to invent or find within ourselves a mother-based economic system that is based on caring for needs instead of on stimulating greed.
So I suggest that we just declare the last 5,000 to 10,000 years an experiment that failed. And we declare this meeting to be the first meeting of the post-patriarchal, post-racist, post-nationalist age.
Particularly at this time in the history of our country and the history of the globe, radical activism is needed more than ever before.
It's been very incredible that Jen employed so many women doing so many different activist activities at one time. I don't believe most people really grasp the magnitude of that and what that has meant for the Austin and Central Texas activist community, as well as solidarity communities in general, to have this powerful group of women.
I think for America and for Texas, the foundation was a great model on international issues, because, you know, it's so rarely linked. And Jen brought together a number of international people.
I had a big RV that I had bought to take vacations in. After the Nairobi conference, I lent it to a Quaker friend, Alice Weiser, who took some of the other women and went from town to town with it, talking about the conference and about women in peace. Another woman, Gertrude Kauderer from Germany, drove a small van around, also talking about women in peace. Then I got a van for Ellen Dietrich and Fazia Jansen in Germany, and they drove it around Europe and finally all the way to Moscow. Then after several years, Susan Lee Solar was working for me in the foundation, and I bought another big RV that she turned into an anti-nuclear museum and drove everywhere, talking about the proposed nuclear waste dump in Sierra Blanca.
And the specific part of it that we're sitting in right now is a traveling anti-nuclear museum, a museum to end the nuclear age. I took it over the Southwest this summer with other wonderful women along with me. The project was conceived to alert the public and inform the public and gather stories from the public about the effects of the nuclear cycle on our economy, our health, our environment.
And how can our children live in an earth that's polluted, where chain reactions of horrible nuclear explosions are allowed to happen and, in fact, encouraged and paid for with our tax money? How can we do such a thing? I think it's really sad. And that is one reason why we built the temple to Sekhmet nearby here, to take a stand against the nuclear testing and to always be there as a little point against the destruction of the earth and for life on earth. A few years after I had been married, we went to Egypt on a trip. And I hadn't had any children, and we wanted children, and it seemed like I was going to never get pregnant. Well, we went to the temple of Luxor and went down in the, down some steps there. And the guide said, well, this here goddess sitting here is the goddess of fertility, and anybody that wants to get pregnant should make her a promise and ask her for a favor. And so I did that. I promised her a temple and asked her that I could get pregnant. And so just about a week later, I actually got pregnant. It was incredible. And for many years, I knew I had made that promise, and I had to maintain it. Coming out here, I thought, well, this is the place to do a temple to the goddess of fertility, because the nuclear radiation is so damaging for everyone's fertility that here we need to take our stand. So I bought the land, and we built this little temple to Sekhmet, who was the goddess that I had seen at the bottom of the stairs. I went ahead and got the temple built, asked the help of a group called Chaos.
I was lucky enough to be connected with a group of women that Genevieve chose to help build this wonderful temple. We camped here on the land. Then we worked off a generator and everything like that. We didn't have the facilities that we do now here.
Our rituals are very relaxed. We don't do a big production of costumes and memorizing. It's very laid back to enjoy, but reverence.
And it is a beautiful spot. It's an oasis in the desert. And there's a fire pit in the temple, so when Patricia does ceremonies, the fire glows at night, and they're copper hoops. The roof is made of copper hoops, and you can see the fire glowing out of the top, and it is just next to heaven. And you can sit there and look towards the test site and really vibe it good. And then I gave the land back to the Shoshone, who owned all of this land at one point. And that seemed like the right thing to do. And I was so blessed because I was able to be in the ceremony of the giving back the land in 1992, which is a ceremony we did here on the land at Cactus Springs, and in which I restored this tiny piece of land back to the Western Shoshone.
Wings exists to carve out a space and to hold a space in broadcast media, in radio, for women's voices and the women's voices from around the world. So that's one of the things. By being weekly and regular and keeping it up for now, it's been 15 years, we've been able to make sure that on a lot of these stations there is a space, they count on it being there, and they allow that women's voices to be on the air. Another purpose is to let the women be heard, and to give the women the gift of being heard, and to give the people who hear it the gift of those women's language, their ideas, and their experiences.
I met Genevieve like 8 months after she had already envisioned and created Feminist International Radio Endeavor and put it in my hands and Catarina Anfosi's hand in Costa Rica. When we decided to tackle the new technologies of internet and computers, we already had like 8 years of experience in international radio, and we decided to bring oral language to the internet because that is the type of communication where women do our best. Whether we speak well or not, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do basically with the fact that women are the ones who carry the tradition of the oral language from generation to generation.
When we broadcast for International Women's Day, coming to you live from the International Women's Tribune Center in New York,
Water is a project that I did with Genevieve Vaughn called Women's Access to Electronic Resources. And it was a project that really I had been working on all of my life. It was one of those projects that I wish had been available for me when I was a young woman starting in media. So I had looked to find an atmosphere that was more conducive to the way women feel comfortable in living their life, rather than have it in a studio like this, kind of very cold and industrial, to have it in a house where you can kind of cook food, you can go out in the backyard and you can do gardening, and besides that, there are the appliances of social change.
Sexuality are an integral, logical part of import-export schemes.
Expropriating the labor and exploiting the labor of women.
In most indigenous societies, there's a common
to diffuse a
understanding.
gift, for instance, because what it means is
The gift,
I don't want to
not
know.
expecting anything in return.
And then in community
and
radio,
contributed to the
Trial
last
is not
political
only
election
for the
over
community,
$12 million.
but it's also
In 2002,
Free software is a movement that stems out of an ethical and political stance
Women's
to
work
mean freedom
must
from
be
corporate
respected
control.
and honored and valued, and so must nature.
We are going to change the paradigm.
Her major source of income all these years has been from oil and gas. Her grandfather bought lots of land in Texas, not knowing of this black gold that was under it. But she has decided that that is not the way the world needs to go, and that oil and gas is not what we need to be using. So she has decided to divest herself of all of her oil and gas interests. And her family thinks she's nuts because it produces so much income. And they and I have told her, yes, you're not going to be able to make that much on any other investment. But she doesn't care. That's not the point. And she's right. It's not the point.
And she's an activist on several levels. I mean, being an activist funder is one thing, and again, that's a loner kind of a deal. Being an activist among funders, trying to get funders to have a different perspective of their funding, trying to, introduce the gift economy and how that might change the way that they do funding, and that's pretty radical, and she's out there doing it by herself. And then she's an activist on the ground. She's been involved in different actions on the ground for years. And I think my perception from talking with her is that that's one of the things that she's most proud of. But like being a mother, it's one of the things that's least noticed.
Billions of people live in shanties all over the world, subjected to hunger and disease. Las casas de cartón, as the song says, cardboard houses. I've seen them in India, Africa, Central America, in the free trade zones on the border between Texas and Mexico. When I was young, I realized that poor people are poor because rich people are rich. There's a transfer of wealth going on between the one and the other. That's why we have to change the paradigm. However much money any individual person has, it's not enough to solve this problem. Only a shift in our thinking and values can change the system.
This is the tree.